All right, good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here with y'all this morning. Thank you, Edisio team, for having me. I hope everybody's ready to switch gears a little bit because we are going to now dive into the marketing perspective of functional foods. And my goal, as somebody who works on social media every single day, my goal is to really look at how do social media trends impact interest in functional foods and how does it drive interest in consumer purchases and what do they really want their foods to do for them. So that's my goal for today's presentation. Little bit of a roadmap for today. I already had a speaker intro, but to be redundant, I have another speaker intro of myself. Functional foods and consumer interest, we're just gonna look high level at how have the functional foods market changed over time. We will look at social media and trends and take a peek at how influential social media really can be in driving consumer interest in products. What my ask was for today's talk was to really look at what are consumers interested in? And so we're gonna take a peek at 6 emerging health topics and nutrients, and these were ones that stand out very clearly to me. So if you have another speaker, they might pick 6 different ones, but to me, these are the ones that are most prevalent online that are driving interest in specific foods to elicit a health response. And then finally, I will just close with some marketing opportunities that I personally see for eggs and poultry and how you can take a peek at the health topics that consumers are looking at online and really play into that with your marketing as well as fortification or enrichment of feed products or human nutrition products. So like I said, to be redundant, speaker intro, my name is Lauren Twig. I'm a registered dietitian. I have a bachelor's degree in animal science from Texas A&M University and then a master's in clinical nutrition. I'm a business owner. I live in Dallas, Texas with my husband and my 2-year-old son. Most importantly, and what really drove my career choice and why I work online the way that I do is I grew up in the ag industry in Central California, so my family still farms there today. My dad's a dairy farmer, and then a variety of tree fruit and row crops and nuts, and I loved growing up in the ag industry. I love working with farmers. I loved the conversations at our dinner table, and that was the world that I grew up in. And then I left that world and I went to Texas A&M, and I realized not everybody knows where their food comes from, and that very quickly breeds misinformation and distrust in farmers and the ag industry as a whole. And so that's really why I became a dietitian. I wanted to find a way to connect consumers back to the farm, and everybody relates to that obviously through their nutrition. And so I built an online social media platform, not to just give consumers practical and doable nutrition tips, but show them a little bit more about where their food comes from, show them who grows their food or who produces their food, and just help them kind of work through a lot of the misinformation that is on social media. And really, at the end of the day, give consumers back their food confidence. That's my goal. So if you're interested, you can follow me at Nutrition at its Roots. So the goal for today's symposium is to obviously talk about functional foods and human health. Oh, I keep looking up there. It's also there. And I wanted to start by just giving a high-level overview of what are functional foods. And I think really simply put, functional foods are simply foods that offer health benefits beyond just nutrition. And this has been a really exploding area of interest. And I think a lot of that has to go back to consumers changing their interest in health and honestly changing their own definition of health. So to a consumer, health is no longer simply the absence of disease. A lot of consumers are defining health by how they feel physically. And so they want to use their foods differently, not just to prevent disease, but to promote overall health and day-to-day wellness. And so that's really driven a lot of interest in functional foods and finding foods that support health beyond just nourishing a body. In fact, some recent research, now they have a new survey out, but 90% of consumers agree that food has benefits beyond just nutrition. So you can see that the demand is really high. But what I think is shifting a lot with consumers today is that a lot of people want to eat their way to better health. So in the past, supplementing and using medications was maybe more prevalent, and it's still definitely prevalent today, but there are a lot of consumers that are shifting away from supplements and shifting away from medications, and they want to eat their way to better health. So they want to eat to avoid developing diabetes. They don't just want to shift their diet to manage diabetes. They want to eat to manage weight. They don't just want to eat to lose weight. They want to eat to feel better. And so that's changing the foods that they're purchasing and what they want their food to do for them. And really, this coincides really closely to the explosion of the food as medicine trend as well. So functional foods and using food as medicine are very closely linked to one another. And as you can see, the global functional foods market has really exploded. So it was $281 billion in 2021, and it's projected to exceed $500 billion by 2028. And those are just those foods that elicit a health response beyond just nourishing the body. So where does social media fit in? And to me, this is a really important slide as somebody who has built their career online. Social media plays a pivotal role in consumer interest in products, and honestly, the demand placed on certain health outcomes. I think that influencers and social media discussions really pique consumers' interest. And so I added a couple statistics that I found really interesting that y'all might find interesting as well. So 4.9 billion people use social media worldwide. It's obviously incredibly prevalent. That number continues to grow. Facebook is still the #1 platform, which I found to be a bit surprising, but across the board, Facebook is still #1. On average, Americans spend 2 hours and 7 minutes a day on social media. Don't look at my social media usage because it is higher than that number. And 50% of consumers trust influencers for product advice. But then moving on beyond that, this No MSG survey was released earlier this year, and they showed that 1 in 4 social media users would go to a social media influencer over a government organization for nutrition advice. So it just shows you the amount of trust that consumers place in online, I'll call them personalities, but online influencers and health educators. And then the MyFitnessPal survey, 87% of millennials and Gen Zers have used social media to research a product or a topic. 57% say they adopted a nutrition trend because of social media, and of that 57%, 67% say they adopt a new trend every week. So you can see where social media plays a massive role in driving consumer interest in products and topics, and at the end of the day, social media is going to drive those trends, and I think it's really important as food marketers and food manufacturers to look at what are the trends that are developing online so that you can really get ahead of your marketing and try to match up with these online health trends and get your product to show the same value and a health outcome that these social media influencers are really pushing. So that's what we're going to do today. I was asked to focus on this, so I typed into Pinterest, which is another social media platform, health promoting foods, and I just kind of wanted to see what were some of the topics that popped up. And these were the 6 that came up most frequently, and they're the ones that I encounter the most online. They're also the ones that I answer the most questions about online. So #1 is gut health. #2 is immune boosting foods. #3 is sleep health. 4, healthy aging and youth. 5 is mood boosting foods, and #6 is hormone health. And all of these are health outcomes that are driving consumer purchases. So I think in order to see what foods are consumers wanting, you need to look at what health outcomes are consumers desiring, and what nutrients, whether proven in research or not proven in research, do they believe will give them these health outcomes. So these are the 6 most common drivers that I see behind consumer food purchases and what they're really interested in. So we're going to break each one down just super briefly. Gut health is by far the largest consumer health trend to hit the food and beverage industry, especially in recent years. It has taken the food industry by storm, really. If you go through the supermarket now or the grocery store now, you will see products of all different shapes and sizes that claim to have some sort of a gut health benefit. They also can get themselves legally into some issues if they don't have proper nutrients actually present to elicit that health response. But as we talked about earlier, there are a lot of rules and regulations going around with these claims. But gut health has been an interesting one because I think it's one that's been talked about by doctors and dietitians in a clinical setting for so long. Managing gut health symptoms in promoting gut health in a clinical setting, but it's really taken consumers' interest recently in promoting day-to-day gut health wellness. And it's because consumers are really connecting gut health as the root of all wellness, that there's the gut-brain axis that consumers are interested in, especially as we live in a society that continues to feel more stressed and more anxious. A lot of people are interested in getting back at a root cause and focusing on gut health and promoting wellness from within. Like I mentioned, the mental wellness, physical health as well, and main outcomes that consumers want with focusing on gut health promoting foods is they want less bloating, they want better health with fewer sensitivities, they want digestive regularity, and overall, they just want overall total wellness. So the nutrients of interest for this category are by far and away probiotics is number one. It's one of the fastest growing markets in food and beverage. Prebiotics, specifically inulin and chicory root, which are the most common prebiotics used. Fiber and fiber-rich foods as well. And then there is growing interest now in use of postbiotics. But that is fairly new. I would say the other three have really taken the gut health industry captive. So next is immune boosting foods. So this one is not in the abstract that I submitted. I initially had it lumped in with gut health because they are so closely tied to one another, but I ended up breaking it out into its own category because I think that it elicits its own slide. So like I said, gut health and immune boosting foods are really closely linked. Having good gut health helps promote immune health. Having good immune health helps support a healthy gut. So they really go and they ebb and flow with one another. But what's interesting is immune health has always been a priority for consumers. I just think where they want to get this immune support has changed. So during cold and flu season, when I was growing up, we had emergency every single day. That was what my family did. But now consumers are really interested in their food, and they want their food to do this for them. And so supplements are really being replaced by these natural immune boosters and more naturally occurring elements or compounds that can help support immunity. What's interesting about this health trend is that there's really two specific opportunities for immune boosting foods. And number one, that's in travel and travel friendly products. Consumers really think about immune health while they are traveling. I think especially following the COVID pandemic, consumers are so aware of germs and cleanliness, and so they are really hyper aware of immune supporting options while they travel. But then also immune boosting beverages, and that really coincides with travel friendly options, but there's a lot of immune boosting beverages. I work a lot in like the milk industry, and even milk is leaning into supporting immunity with a lot of their messaging. And so it's very common in the beverage industry to see some of these immune boosting claims. Main outcomes that consumers want: they want stronger immune systems in general, they want less sickness, and they want shorter illness times when they do become sick. So nutrients of interest here, like I said, with the gut health and immune health being so closely linked, a lot of those gut health supporting nutrients are top of mind for consumers. Protein as a building block for a lot of your immune system is of course important. Antioxidants, the typical vitamins like vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc and selenium are gaining a lot of interest in immune health and taking and supplementing with some of those, but then also focusing on foods that are rich in zinc and selenium. And then beyond that, other additions to food that have become incredibly popular are elderberry, turmeric, garlic, and apple cider vinegar as ways to support an immune system. Next up is sleep health. So this is a really popular one online, which is so interesting to me. So we live in a society that works later, we scroll on our phones later at night, and I think about these people, going to bed and scrolling on their social media, and they probably encounter a tip on how to sleep better. I'm like, you could probably just turn your phone off. But, that's okay. So sleep health is really popular online. Consumers are looking for foods and beverages that will help them relax, that are going to help them fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and promote deeper sleep. So if anybody is on TikToks, the Sleepy Girl mocktail is really popular in the TikTok space. Whether it actually works or not is very argued and highly debated, but it is just a drink of tart cherry juice, a magnesium powder, and then generally a carbonated beverage, most often a prebiotic-containing beverage. But in January, that had almost 60 million views, that specific hashtag. So consumers are really looking for something that's going to help them relax and sleep. And like I mentioned, their main outcomes here that they want are first and foremost, consumers want more energy and less fatigue. And so they're hoping to do that by getting better sleep and focusing on foods and beverages and dietary habits that help them sleep better. They want to fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. So nutrients of interest in this health bucket are tryptophan. You know, we all hear about the Thanksgiving tiredness, and a lot of that is related to tryptophan in turkey. And so tryptophan is of interest for consumers. Of course, magnesium is really, really hot in the sleep health market. Vitamin D, omega-3 fats, melatonin containing and supporting foods, as well as serotonin supporting foods. And a lot of that is just getting at relaxation and helping them fall asleep faster. Next up is a fairly new one, and I think this has really developed over the last 20 years, but we live in an aging population, and so this demographic is incredibly unique and I think a huge opportunity for marketing. The American population is the oldest that it's ever been. 1 in 4 American adults will be 65 years and older by 2060, and globally, by 2050, the world's population of individuals over 60 years will double. I think I had it written down on my computer, which I don't have up here, but by 2030, there's going to be more adults than kids. So we just live in an aging population, but the reality about this population is while they're aging, they don't want to look like they're aging, and they don't want to feel like they're aging. And so they want foods and drinks and lifestyle habits that are going to support healthy aging and youthfulness. So main outcomes that this is really focused on, number one is cognitive health. As you get older, they still want to feel mentally sharp and focused. Joint health is huge, and being able to do the things that they love, especially if they have young kids at home or grandkids at home, they want to be able to feel like they can still keep up. So joint health is really important. Skin elasticity, like I said, nobody wants to look like they're getting older, so skin elasticity and youthfulness is really important in this population, and then muscle maintenance and weight management as well. Like I said, they want to stay in a body that feels young, and they want to participate in habits and choose foods that help maintain their muscle and manage their weight. So nutrients of interest here, of course, collagen is incredibly popular in this space for youthfulness and joint health. Antioxidants, just to kind of fight some of those aging processes that go on in the body. Omega-3 fats. Protein for muscle maintenance and weight management. Vitamin B12 for cognitive health is really big, and as we get older, our absorption of vitamin B12 does decrease, and so a lot of individuals start to really emphasize vitamin B12 rich foods or supplements to help stay on top of cognitive health. And then calcium and vitamin D for bone health as well are really popular. Next up, we have mood-boosting foods. So this is also fairly new, but this is more popular. We just got onto the aging population. Now we're going to look at the younger population. Mood-boosting foods has really exploded in the grocery store. I just walked through the store the other day, and there were so many foods and beverages that had a mood-boosting claim of some sort on them. And 74% of Americans believe that food has an impact on their emotional well-being. And this is really popular among Gen Z and millennials, much more so than boomers. And the main outcomes that they really want, again, kind of going back to what I spoke about earlier, more energy and less fatigue. So that's seen in the sleep health, but that's also seen in the mood boosting space as well, because when you feel fatigued and you feel low on energy, feel sometimes your whole personality just feels blah. And so they want more energy, they want more mental clarity, alertness, and focus at work and in life. And most importantly in this space is consumers want to find ways to manage and reduce stress, and they specifically focus on cortisol-reducing foods and dietary habits. Nutrients of interest here are blood sugar balancing foods, so that's a huge bucket. They specifically look at fiber and protein here, but a lot of that gets at that sustained energy and keeping more energy throughout the day, feeling less fatigued. Vitamin D and vitamin B12 and CoQ10 for focus, that's always been very popular. And then tyrosine as a precursor for dopamine. And then the last bucket, I got to keep track of my time here. Last bucket is really popular among females. So this is one that has gained a lot of interest online. If you go and you spend any amount of time, you will find at least 12 hormone specialist platforms that, give out hormone balance tips with diet. And this is really, really growing, like I mentioned, specifically for females who are looking for ways to balance hormones naturally and hopefully get away from pharmaceutical interventions. So the goal is to regulate the body's hormones naturally, but they want to do this by supporting thyroid health. They want to optimize their immune function and keep an overall healthier body. They want to maintain their blood sugar with the goal to reduce stress markers in the body. And hopefully an outcome for a very specific niche of the female population is they want to better manage conditions like PCOS, endometriosis, infertility, and more. So there is some interest from males in testosterone-supporting foods and boosting foods, but I've found that this is large in a way more popular among the female population, at least in the social media space. Nutrients of interest. So one thing that's interesting about this health trend is that it has really pushed women back towards fat, and I think that that's actually really nice. They see now the role that various fats play in building up hormones and maintaining hormone health, and so women are starting to include more fat back in their diet with a big focus on omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, choline, folate, selenium, a lot of B vitamins, but specifically vitamin B12, magnesium, and then that blood sugar balance, again, is really important in the hormone balance space. So what opportunities, as I close, what opportunities do I see for egg and poultry? So, like I mentioned, I think in order to understand how to market, you want to know what health responses do these consumers want out of their food. And I see if you take a peek at those nutrients that I had listed on the right-hand side, there's actually a lot that overlap with eggs and poultry. It's just marketing them so that consumers remember, oh yeah, that was a nutrient that I wanted for hormone balance. That's what that hormone expert said. And so it's getting a lot of education around the natural nutrient density of eggs and poultry, because as I mentioned, there is a big shift in consumers getting away from supplements and pharmaceutical intervention, and they want to find foods that are naturally nutrient dense, that are naturally going to help achieve the same thing that a supplement could. So, of course, there's omega-3 fortified eggs, which has huge opportunity. Omega-3 was on almost all of those lists. Protein for longevity, muscle health, blood sugar management, and weight management. You can check the boxes on almost every population, depending on what health outcome they're interested in. Rich in B vitamins, choline for brain development and health. That was on the hormone balance list as well. The other thing that I think, like I mentioned, leaning into the naturally nutrient dense, I think that's something that really sets eggs and poultry apart. But the other thing is that eggs can be used for snacks, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you want to get creative, you could do the same with poultry. But eggs, and they're also vegetarian friendly, depending on the type of vegetarian diet that you eat. So there's a lot of opportunity. Specific areas of interest that I see, why I think it's important to mention that eggs can be used for snacks, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, is there is a lot of interest in functional snacks. As consumers are getting more interested in blood sugar balance, they're starting to eat more often, so smaller meals more often throughout the day with the goal to sustain energy. But they want those snacks to mean something, and they want those snacks to do something, and so they're really interested in building up functional snacks. So marketing to where you show your product as a snack and that it can elicit this health response could be an opportunity. And then consumers are also really interested in including these functional foods at breakfast. So they want to get a lot of these nutrients or compounds in on an empty stomach, and they think that that will give them a larger health response. So there is growing interest in getting these functional foods in early on. Finally, my last slide, a couple barriers and considerations. So consumers love to talk about health. They love to talk about how much they value health. They like to talk about the importance of health to them. But at the end of the day, cost and taste continue to by far be the top drivers behind consumer purchases. So they want these health responses, but it still has to taste good. And it still has to be obviously something that they can afford. The other thing to consider is as you start to add more and more to these products, they tend to get more and more inaccessible to certain populations. And so keeping a lot of these Functional foods, naturally nutrient-dense foods, affordable to everybody is going to be important. And then finally, health claims need to be substantiated by scientific evidence. So there's already been companies in the past that have put a health claim on their marketing, and they've had lawsuits brought against them because they didn't actually have anything present at a level that would elicit that health response. And so I think there's a really fine balance between the function, including nutrients that can elicit a health response, flavor, fun, and also facts. So it needs to be rooted in science at the end of the day. So finally, in closing, some opportunities. We looked at the power that social media has in driving trends, and that the power that social media has in pushing consumers towards certain products. It's why cottage cheese is hard to find at the grocery store right now, and a lot of that is just because of social media. And so really harness the power of social media and use educated influencers. Their audiences really trust them. And so you can really use that trust as a way to share products and research in a relatable way and a trustworthy way. And then finally, focus on health trend marketing. We looked at 6 key areas that I see emerging online. Some of them have been around for a while. Some of them are growing in interest. And really lean into the marketing and fill that need. If those are what the consumers are wanting out of their food, being sure to market towards that. There's opportunity for feed fortification for some of those health-promoting nutrients that I mentioned on the right-hand side of each slide. And then, again, leaning into the natural nutrition of eggs and poultry for the consumers that want to eat their way to better health and not supplement. So with that, I will close. Thank you so much.